in gallery view. So welcome everyone to the Buddhist Path of Awakening course. Tonight, we're really beginning to get into the Vajrayana. And so I want to start with something different. This is called pointing out in the tradition, pointing out instruction. It has many names. So take a good posture, although frankly, you could do this standing on your head. But we can do it sitting too, in a good meditation posture. Your eyes are open. Gaze is relaxed, natural. Direct it wherever you like. Your awareness is open, effortless, right here. Just now. Whatever is appearing, any of the objects of the senses, thoughts, your awareness is clear, like your eyes, the vision. Whatever is appearing to your mind, no problem, that's it. This awareness is fundamental to us. It's with us all the time. You can't shut it off. You can interrupt it by going off into dream, and then you come back. This awareness is like the sky, always there. Clouds may come and go, but the sky is always present. This is the core of Buddhist practice, and it's the core especially of Vajrayana. We'll be talking about it tonight. The name for this practice, or this faculty of mind you might call it, is Rigpa, R-I-G-P-A. That's the Tibetan. The Sanskrit is Vidya. And they both mean the same thing, obviously, just different languages. They mean this clear, effortless awareness that is our foundation. We're all resting in it now, perhaps with some sidetracks into thoughts, and then those thoughts dissolve, and here it is, like the sky, never departs. This is the foundational practice of the Vajrayana, and since the Vajrayana is the imperial yana, sort of the capstone of Buddhism, this is the fundamental core practice of Buddhism altogether. What an irony that it's so effortless. What an irony that it's part of us all the time. Always has been. Always will be. This is the core practice that we come back to, resting in this awareness. Rigpa. Vidya. In the Kagyu tradition, it's called Tamalgishepa, which means ordinary mind. It's completely ordinary. Isn't that hilarious? And yet, it's the key to everything. So, let's launch into this chapter, this very profound and not so easy chapter. And bear in mind that this experience of Vidya of Rigpa, of ordinary mind, is the foundation. It's the core. It's the key. So Michael, take it away.
So welcome everyone. It would be helpful, I think, in understanding this chapter to keep in mind or to come back in mind to what John just talked about, because I think that will help with understanding some of what is presented in this chapter. In a previous chapter, Trungpa Rinpoche said that the Vajrayana is beyond words, and yet in this chapter there are a lot of words. It's important to keep in mind that all of these words are used to try to do something, which is to point something out to us, to help us come to understand or be able to recognize something that perhaps often we're unaware of or gets buried, so that we need to uncover it, which was the title of the last chapter, Uncovering. And the more we can keep this in mind, the easier it is, I think, to approach the Vajrayana. So the title of this chapter is The Multifaceted Diamond Path. And as I said, actually a lot of different words. And he says right at the beginning that in speaking of the Vajrayana, one cannot give a straight talk without making references to something else. It's a complete network. So we try to do our best. And so we have a lot of words that present to us different aspects of the practice, of the Vajrayana, of what we're doing, of what we're trying to understand. But the point is they're all really pointing to the same thing, or we could say that they're different facets of the same thing. And so the point of this is to help us understand, recognize, come to see in ourselves what our nature is. But as I say, there are a lot of different words, as he says, there are a lot of different words and terms, and that these are not in any particular hierarchy. But the terms we'll be going through are Vajrayana, Tantrayana, Mantrayana, Vidyadharana, Fruitionyana, Upayana, Guyayana, Dharanayana, Yana of luminosity, and Imperial Yana. So a lot of words. But the important thing is to look beyond the words, not to mistake, as it's often said traditionally, that the problem with words and conceptual mind altogether is we have a tendency to mistake the words and the concepts for the actual experience. So it's easy to just say awareness, but not really have a sense of what that means or what that experience is, what it is that we feel and when we actually are aware. And yet, if we stop, slow down, and actually see the meaning behind the word, then something more powerful happens. So the first word for what we're going to be talking about is Vajrayana itself. Vajra meaning indestructible or diamond, and Yana meaning vehicle. So it's the indestructible vehicle. And he actually begins by saying that the Vajrayana is known as the quick path to enlightenment. Its quickness mainly comes because it's so direct, that it's pointing right to something. As he says, such a path can't be hampered by our general tendency to edit the world or our perceptions in terms of what we like or dislike, or to wander with our minds, which is called discursive thought. So in the Hinayana and the Mahayana, we become familiar through meditation practice and through study of some of our tendencies to do exactly that, to edit the world in terms of our likes and dislikes, to become lost in discursive thought and dreams. And through meditation practice, we come increasingly to realize that there's a profound difference in our experience when we're present as opposed to when we're distracted. There's a difference in how we relate to ourselves. There's a difference in how we relate to other people. And more, this becomes clearer and clearer to us. And in the Vajrayana, the practices that we work with to deal with that increasingly cut through those tendencies to edit our world in terms of what we like and dislike, which is the expression of ego, to get lost in discursiveness, to increasingly work on cutting through those tendencies directly. Or, as Trungpa Rinpoche said in a previous chapter that we read, that this leads to two possibilities. Either we recognize neurosis and get into the Vajrayana, or we remain stuck in our neurotic stuff as we have all along. So, and this will come up again, this idea that we have really in the Vajrayana fundamentally comes down to the choice of either being awake or not. And that increasingly, as we practice meditation and study, we become increasingly, the word that one teacher used in explaining to me, habituated to being awake, to being aware. And that the practice of meditation is a process of habituating ourselves to what it means to this possibility of waking up. He says entering the Vajrayana is similar to the early level of entering the Buddhist path, that when we take refuge, which is the beginning of the Hinayana path, we vow to enter without being sidetracked by any other disciplines. And the Vajrayana, he says, very similarly does not allow sidetracks. We maintain ourselves in Vajrayana discipline. So again, two possibilities. Fundamentally, we stay stuck in neurosis, confusion, distortion, or we wake up. It's as simple as that. And we have that experience in meditation practice in just that moment where we realize we become lost in thought. And we could go further. We could even begin thinking about, why did I get so lost in thought, and continue to stay lost in thought, or we can simply come back. Again, the Vajrayana is that direct. He says that skillful means and knowledge work together inseparably in the Vajrayana. And here we're talking about skillful means and wisdom, or prajna, both in terms of how we work with ourselves and the practices that are skillful means in the Vajrayana, as well as how we work with the world and the people around us. He says this coming together of skillful means and knowledge takes place by means of understanding sacredness of vision and form, sacredness of communication, sacredness of the world, and sacredness of consciousness and mind. And through the rest of this section, he'll be talking about body, speech, and mind in different ways that I think are all getting at what it means to experience a sense of sacredness. But again, I'd like to read a piece from the previous chapter, chapter 3, where he says that sense of sacredness comes about from the continuity of Tantra. When our body, speech, and mind are synchronized, we are fully here. Again, when our body, speech, and mind are synchronized, we are fully here. Because we are fully here, fully present, fully awake, fully in the experience of Rigpa that John was talking about, we can't help but experiencing natural warmth, natural isness, and natural brilliance. He says if we're true to ourselves, if we're here with our body, speech, and mind joined together, that kind of reality begins to dawn on us. And I just point out, just in the section that I just read, his use of the word natural warmth, natural isness, just things as they are, and natural brilliance, the vividness, the luminosity of things. The sense of the importance of using the word natural is that we don't need to create these things. We just need to wake up and realize what's already there. That it's not a matter of making things different than they are. It's a matter of seeing things as they actually are. He says by joining knowledge and skillful means, our body, speech, and mind can be coordinated, meaning that we're fully present, and that this creates Vajra body, Vajra speech, and Vajra mind. So here, I think, again, as we talked about in the previous chapter, we're talking about uncovering or letting go of body neurosis, speech neurosis, and mind neurosis, which we did talk about in the previous chapter, also chapter 3. And if you remember back, in terms of body neurosis, what we're talking about is our tendency to hold on to our body as something that we'd like to hold on to keep back as private property, our personal project, our personal territory. That speech neurosis includes the expressions that come from the subconscious gossip level, such as expressions of hate or love, whether frivolous or meaningful. And that mind neurosis is where we begin to develop passion, aggression, and ignorance. So here we are editing the world in terms of what we like and dislike. Here we are caught up in habitual patterns where we relate to the world through the distortions of either what we wish was there or what we're afraid is there, what we'd like to hold on to, what we hope we could push away. And when this happens, then body, speech, and mind aren't synchronized. We become, as he says, we become clumsy, we become awkward, we become aggressive. So Vajra body is connected with indestructibility, the indestructibility of awareness. When we're fully aware, awareness is indestructible. It never ceases, as John says. It doesn't come from anything. It's just who we naturally are. It doesn't depend on anything else to create it. It's just here. It's who we are. Speech is connected with, Vajra speech is connected with lucidity, clarity, and a communicating or echoing quality. And Vajra mind is connected with a penetrating, clear, concentrated, and he says the word shifty quality, which was interesting to me. I had to look up shifty myself because sometimes I found that words have definitions that I wasn't aware of. And among the definitions for shifty are resourceful. And I think that's probably more what he means, although it could also mean that in terms of this, the flexibility or workability of mind. He says that Vajrayana practice brings these three principles, Vajra body, Vajra speech, and Vajra mind together, whether in formal visualization practice or in formless practice. So again, there are many different types of skillful means in the Vajrayana to help us realize our true nature, our awareness, our rigpa. But that all of them involve bringing together body, speech, and mind, synchronized, so that we're fully present. He says that these three principles of body, speech, and mind are inseparable, that solidness speaks, speech thinks, and so on, that there's a oneness to these three principles. And with this, when body, speech, and mind are synchronized, then the whole thing becomes very cohesive, workable, and intelligent, efficient, and enlightening. So that is the nature of indestructible vehicle, indestructible awareness that we can experience, that we increasingly become habituated to, identified with, realize is our true nature in the Vajrayana. And the second word then is Tantra or Tantrayana, which he defines as the vehicle of continuity. And he says that Gyu can mean either thread or continuity. And this is basically the continuity of awareness, the continuity of wakefulness. He says that Tantra is actually the thread, continuity, that runs through the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana simultaneously. And that this is a thread that's never broken. That he describes meeting the teacher, which is meeting the elder in the Hinayana, meeting the spiritual friend, which relates to the Hinayana, and meeting the Vajra master, which is the role of the teacher in the Vajrayana, as basically all being the same, that we're always being enjoined to wake up. We're always being enjoined to recognize our full awareness, our capacity to be completely awake. He says in order to experience or have a glimpse of the Hinayana, we usually need to refer back to our Hinayana and Mahayana practices. So we begin to experience something of what the Vajrayana means through our experiences in the Hinayana and Mahayana. And the reason we can do this is because there is this thread of this continuity of awareness, of being, of having wakefulness, the possibility of wakefulness pointed out to us again and again and again. He says that Tantra, or continuity, means that the stream of our existence, our body, speech, and mind, has been linked together with this particular teaching. So we begin to find that from beginning to end, there is a continuity and a unity, and that we can actually work with our neurosis. We can work with the temporary obstacles and obscurations that cover over our fundamentally awake quality. He says Gyu is continuous. Gyu is Tibetan word for continuity. He says, very simply, it means that we begin to realize that our basic being, the means to develop our goal, and the goal itself are connected. And again, we're talking about something that's natural or innate in us. It's nothing that we need to add. It's nothing that we're lacking, nothing that needs to be taken away. That waking up, possibility of awareness, sanity is in us, and that what we're doing is simply coming to recognize who we are in the Vajrayana. But that this is actually a thread that runs through the Hinayana and Mahayana as well. He says our basic characteristics are not separate from our goal, and the goal cannot exist without the path and the origin. So here he says on the ground level, gyu, or continuity, means that the habitual patterns of body, speech, and mind are included as one continuous whole. So here, a couple of different possibilities. This is actually, I'm curious to hear what other people might think of that line. That means the habitual patterns of body, speech, and mind are included as one whole. I think one sense here is that with the Vajrayana, we work with the totality of experience. And we begin to see how, when we synchronize body, speech, and mind, we see how they're connected, how they work together. Or when they're unsynchronized, how they don't work together, and in fact, might even clash. So here there's a sense that nothing's excluded, that nothing is left out. In this regard, and again, I'll read just a brief quote from a previous chapter. He says, it may seem as if the Vajrayana is doing the same things as the earlier yanas all over again. But in the Vajrayana, we're dealing much further with the negative and neurotic world. In the Hinayana, the approach is to withdraw from passion and aggression, to withdraw from the passion and aggression provoking world. And in the Mahayana, it is to exchange self for other with Tonglen practice. But in the Vajrayana, we talk about Vajra nature as an expression of being willing to relate more with the phenomenal world. So in dealing with the habitual patterns of our body, speech, and mind, we're dealing with the totality of our experience and coming to see the wisdom and clarity that's there, at least in their essence. On a path level, he says the gyu, or continuity, refers to the continuous application of methods and techniques to overcome ego. And in the Vajrayana, there are many, many different techniques: visualization practices, mantra practices, yogic practices, practices working with energy, but they're all aimed at the same thing. They're all designed to help us wake up. They're all designed to help us become increasingly clear about ourselves as we are and the world as it is. He says the fruition aspect of gyu is that it gives us the realization of who we are and what we are. It gives us the realization of who we are and what we are. He says that is called attaining the state of Vajradhara, the primal Buddha, primordial Buddha, the final realization of the highest level of Dharma. So, again, going over ground, path, and fruition, he says the ground is who and what we are. The path is what we can do about it, or how to accomplish our inheritance of wakefulness. And the fruition is that these two are linked together. He says with the fruition aspect, we're not changing ourselves into somebody else. We're simply becoming who we are, which is a delight. There's a continuity in that. And to the extent that we don't recognize who we are, to the extent that what we might experience might not seem like a delight, is because of distorted vision, because of confusion, because of the temporary obstacles that cover over and obscure what our true nature is. He says at that level, when we become who we are, what we are, at that level we combine our body with the body of the Tathagatas, those who have gone beyond ego, gone beyond dreams, gone beyond distortion. We combine our body with the body of the Tathagatas, or realized ones. Our speech becomes one with the speech of the Tathagatas, and our mind becomes one with the mind of the Tathagatas. Therefore, there's a continuity from beginning to end. And he compares this in some ways to just what our lives are like, that that from infancy to childhood to adolescence to adulthood to old age, that it's all related. It's all one continuous process of growing up. And see, similarly in Tantra, there's a continuity because consciousness or awareness cannot be broken down into different departments, but moments of consciousness are all connected together. Again, it's to do with looking at and coming to understand what the nature of our fundamental awareness is. Therefore, he says, when we have our first glimpse of fruition, we can't just regard that as a warning. As soon as we tread on the path, we have an idea of what the fruition might be. We can't disregard that and can't view it as really not being about the fruition. And he says the basic quality of the Vajrayana teachings altogether is that there is a link from the origin of ourselves to the path, and from the path there's a link to what might be. He says, so our first glimpse of Tantra, our first flash, includes some impression of what Tantra might be like. He says, like a bud, a bud may still be a bud, but it's still a real flower at some point. And he says this sense of reality is always there, though we cannot really grasp at that reality as we would like. It's not something that we can possess in the sense of something solid and definite, but rather something that we can wake up to. In Tantra, we have a real glimpse as to what it might be like to become an awakened person. He says there's a faint glimpse or warning taking place constantly, which is very interesting and very powerful. And for that reason, Tantra is unlike the other yanas, Mahayana, Hinayana, is unlike the other yanas which talk about how fertile we are and how much potential we have. In the Vajrayana, we talk about what we are, not what we're not. Talking about what we actually are is, again, very direct, and he says actually lethal to ego suggestion. And at the same time, it's inspiring. He says, again, that getting into the Vajrayana is symbolized by a snake getting into a bamboo pipe. It can either face upward or downward. We either go directly down or we attain enlightenment all at once. There's no ambiguity. It's very direct, very simple, and very meaningful. And he closes this section by saying Tantra means business, and there's power behind it to support us, whatever takes place. That it's continuous, real, direct, and very personal. So John's going to continue with, again, some of the other terms that relate to describing the Vajrayana. But again, I think that all of them are pointing to something that we can actually experience, or at least have glimpses or flashes of. And he says, once we begin to have these flashes, we can't ignore them. So John will take it from here.
Thank you, Michael. So what we're having flashes of as we go further and further into the Vajrayana is just this clear awareness right here in the present moment. And our loyalty, you might say, is switching from thought, which turns out to be utterly unnecessary, to this awareness, this formless, clear, sensitive, intelligent awareness, which is called Ritva, Vidya in Sanskrit. And it's really the heart, it's the continuity. Tantra means continuity. Gyu in Tibetan is the word for Tantra, and it means the same thing, continuity. It means Tantra. And the continuity is the continuity of this clear, open awareness that we become increasingly committed to, that we experience increasingly. And our whole world changes. The values are utterly different in Gyu, in this Ritva, than they are in the world of thought. Another name for this vehicle, the Vajrayana, is the Mantrayana. Mantra literally means, we think of mantra as meaning like Om Mani Padme Hum, or whatever it might be, a series of words strung together, and that is a meaning of mantra, one of them. But mantra at its most fundamental means mind protection. Manas, man, tra, as in protection. So it's the protection of mind. How do we protect mind? The ultimate protection is to come back to this clear awareness. The way in which we are unprotected is when we devolve, when we follow our habits into what's called neurotic mind, sem. That's not rikpa, it's not tamagi shepa, it's sem. Sem is small mind. In the Zen tradition, they call it little mind, as opposed to big mind. It's thinking mind. It's the mind of emotions and thoughts. And in sem, we are at risk. We're at risk because we're the victim of the three poisons and all the emotions. We are the victims of depression and unhappiness, of samsara, of wishing things were otherwise, all of which takes place in thought. And what we're being enjoined to do is to let go into this very, very formless, fresh world of the present moment, in which everything is constantly being presented, in which we are constantly having an opportunity to interact in ways that are creative, in which we can experience compassion, love, clarity. And so mantrayana, in Tibetan, it's ngakki tekpa. Tekpa always means yana, vehicle. Ngak is the word for mantra, and ki, K-Y-I, is a possessive particle, like apostrophe S, or of. So it's the vehicle of mantra. And this is more widely used in traditional Tibetan circles than the word tantra, because tantra also has the meaning of a particular kind of advanced text. And usually when people speak of a tantra, they're speaking of a text. But it can also mean the vehicle. But when you talk about mantrayana, nakti tekpa, it's only the practices that are part of the Vajrayana. And all of those practices are basically aimed at helping us realize our true nature, which is this clear, open awareness that we can come back to all the time because it's always there waiting. So mind protection, he says about this mind protection mantra, it's like a tank with 9 forward gears. Why 9? Because in the Nyingma scheme, the Nyingma description of the Vajrayana, there are 9 vehicles, 9 stages, culminating in the supreme one, which is called Dzogchen, the supreme vehicle, the great perfection. So this vehicle, the Vajrayana, has 9 forward gears: Kriya Yoga, Upa Yoga, Maha Yoga, Anu, and Ati. Those are the 6 Vajrayana vehicles. And then there's the Hinayana with its 2 vehicles, the Shravakayana and the Pratyekayana, Buddhayana, and then the Mahayana, giving a total of 9. He says there are no brakes once you get into the Vajrayana, no reverse, though it does have a steering wheel and doesn't need gas. That's really, I guess the steering wheel is that you can do different practices, and the practices themselves, the more you relax into this awareness, present moment, that's the gas. He says, usually when we say mind, we're referring to what is termed sem, as I just said, which is in Sanskrit is chitta. The Tibetan is sem, which is thinking, emoting mind. Later in this book, you're going to come where he goes through about a page of saying over and over again, we don't need thought. People think they need thought, and that's another thought, but you don't need it. This awareness, rikpa, is core. So the mind protects itself, that protects itself is not the mind of territoriality, it is the intelligence alone, which is Rikpa, Vidya. This clear, open awareness is the ultimate intelligence. It sees everything and understands much more than the world of thought. The protection, it comes naturally as we begin to switch our allegiance to Rikpa. And then he talks about it being secret. It's self-secret. Because until a person has had this kind of pointing out, however vague their understanding may be, they have no clue. It's a self-secret. It has to depend on connecting with the lineage, on connecting with this ultimately silent, completely natural, completely organic awareness, what we are. And it's a self-secret because people don't understand it. And it's the same time it is a proclamation that brings a secret message. If you understand it, you understand it. And if you don't, he says you're liable to be kicked out because it has turned out to be too lethal for you. So you should be kicked out to save your life. So protection from comfort. At this point, there is still a need for protection from religiosity. Religiosity is anathema to this kind of awareness. This kind of awareness is the true religiosity. It involves, when one comes back to it, true appreciation for the phenomenal world, the whole world, as it arises and passes away. True love, true compassion, and true intelligence. The three main principles of this world seen through the lens of Rigpa, if you can even call it a lens because it's really not there as a lens, seen in Rigpa, are that it is free, it is open, it is constantly changing, and it is present now, only now. That's one. The second quality is that it is constantly communicating to us, telling us what it is, in words, in colors, in shapes, in smells, in all kinds of ways. And the third quality is that it has love, huge love, the warmth of this world, seen through this lens of Rigpa. So, with mantra, one gives up the feeling of protection or security of the previous yanas. You need to keep doing this until you no longer need to rely on any form of security. You have to abandon that. And it's a spell or an incantation, a positive, healthy spell, as it were, by which you bring the world together by means of an utterance, one thought liberating everything, freeing you from neurosis. And he says we recite mantras in Sanskrit. He wanted to translate the teachings into English, but he drew the line at mantra because mantra is, he said, is primordial, an archetypal sound. It's a psychological state, and each mantra has its own meaning. Many mantras are simply onomatopoeic, enlightened sound to remind those of you who've forgotten the word, what onomatopoeic means. It's a word that sounds like what it means. So for instance, swish is onomatopoeic because it sounds, the word, like what it means, swish, like that. And he's saying that mantra is onomatopoeic. It sounds like what it means. And he compares it to the howling of coyotes, which is pretty terrific. Mantric sounds. They do their tantric practice or sadhana, and you are haunted by it. You hear that howling. And this is what mantra hum is meant to be, for instance, or whatever the mantra might be. It's joining wisdom and joy. Another definition of mantra is joining wisdom and joy. Joining wisdom. Now, whenever he uses the word wisdom, remember Rigpa, this clear, open awareness. It's not a matter of brains or knowledge or understanding how things work, although that comes too. But wisdom really here means rikpa. It's the ultimate intelligence, giving up prejudice, thought, clinging of any kind to some form of security, and instead resting in this free-form, open intelligence. This is the ultimate form of wisdom. And wisdom is a translation, one of the translations for this kind of intelligence. It's an inadequate translation, but it's what we've got in English. He says we relate to mantra as a key to the magical aspect of this world. That when we begin to come back into this clear, open awareness, we begin to become so much more intuitive and sensitive about what the world is and intelligent. And you can begin to see the future because the future is contained in the present. The present is already moving towards it. And when you become more intelligent about what the present is, you become much more intelligent about where things are going now. You become much more intelligent about the world around you, people around you. You know, people say one thing but mean another. They have some kind of an agenda going on in their heads. When you begin to clear your mind of thought and rest in this open awareness of rikpa, you begin to see into people's minds much more clearly. And that can be both pleasant and unpleasant. Mantra is the combination of mahasukha and jnana. They can work together. Jnana is another word for this intelligence. It means knowledge, the ultimate knowledge, non-dual knowledge. You see, this knowledge of this world, this clear, open awareness, is non-dual. Subject and object happen in thought, and we're back into little mind, sem. But in big mind, there is no subject and object. It's just this clear, open awareness in which everything is arising and passing away in the moment. And this awareness is he says, this is the joining of wisdom and joy, or insight and bliss, because the more one relaxes into this, the more one appreciates the beauty, the warmth, the heart, and that becomes the bliss, the sukha, dewa in Tibetan. And it becomes the key to the magical aspect of this world. It's a slogan or a proclamation, this mantra. And it's overcoming frivolity. Frivolity is contained in thought. It's silly. It becomes stupid. And it becomes a self-entertainment and a self-occupation. He says the technique of mantra is continuous, this awareness, linear, ongoing, a long boat ride. It's a technique, and it might have involved the quality of boredom, because little mind keeps coming in and looking for something to entertain itself. We don't like to remain in boredom and can become unreasonable and demanding. We'd like to change scenes all the time. This is what little mind does, sem. It says, the setting sun society provides for that restlessness with endless opportunities for entertainment, to silence little mind. Little mind is always looking for some way it's so irritating, it's so anxious that it wants to silence itself, and it looks for entertainment, foods, things to buy, Amazon, the internet, etc. There's a fear of being with yourself when in little mind, which means that fundamentally you do not like yourself. That's what thinking mind does. Thinking mind doesn't like itself. It's always looking for something better. And in looking for something better, it's saying that this is not good enough. So thinking mind doesn't like itself, as opposed to this rikpa, this clear, open awareness, is the ultimate appreciation, this ultimate giving, opening to the world as it is right now, in this present moment. He says that small mind, little mind is fickle. You're not willing to live with yourself at all. You're constantly looking for something better. Mantra protects you from your mind, from that cheap scale of existence. We come back to this vidya, rikpa, all the time. And it has a sense of continuity. Boy, does it ever, because this never stops. This rikpa, this vidya, utterly continuous. It's not frivolity, it's seriousness with tremendous humor. And he says this humor is brought about by compassion. Because when we come back into this present moment here, now, this clarity, we begin to feel the love, the heat, the pink of the cheeks, the colors of the world in one way or another, the taste of the sweet and sour, the feeling of the physical world as you touch your desk, as you feel your bottom in the chair, all of this. And what begins to happen as you relax and this heat and this warmth presents itself and the meaningfulness of it is clear, humor arises. And humor is a big feature of this world of reality. He says, we begin to achieve magical power over the phenomenal world and oneself by knowing the sensitive focal points in the phenomenal world and in your own psychological world, which is saying the same thing in some sense, because we're becoming so much more truly intelligent, truly open and sensitive to what this world and what we are. So to save yourself from swimming in samsaric mind circles, and then he says, mantra could be described as protecting the intelligence of mind, which is able to see the sensitive points of the phenomenal world. When we come present, we see so much more. We're sensitive, we're open, we're aware, we're intuitive. Our so-called intuition is really the sensitivity of this open mind of Rigpa. He says the repetition of mantra, saying Om Mani Padme Hum or whatever it might be, is not such a big deal. What is a big deal is the idea of protecting the mind, the intelligence, the Buddha nature, because this is what Buddha nature is. It's another name for Buddha nature. That essential element that exists within us. Then there's the Vidyadhara yana. Vidyadhara in Tibetan is Rigzen, the Rigzen. So it's the Rigzen Tekpa, the Rigzen yana. Rigzen literally means Rigpa. That's what Rig is. And Zin means holder. So a person who has achieved realization is a Rigzen, a holder of Rigpa. That's what Rigzen means. And Vidyadhara is the Sanskrit for that. The Vidyadhara yana. Vidya is Rigpa, and Dhara is holder. So it's the holder of Vidya, the holder of this clear awareness, which is the key to it all. He says this definition is based on understanding of visualizations and deities. We've got all these pictures like the guy above my shoulder here on the wall. That's Dorje Trollo, Padmasambhava. And they are expressions of ourselves, of our personal energies, and are enlightened, awakened. Maybe awakened is a better word here. Potential. That's what these are, and we work with these. In the Vajrayana, you'll work with images. There are practices where you will work with a particular deity like this guy, because they represent your true nature, your true intelligence. And these are given to us by a Vajra master with whom we work as expressions of ourselves, and the expressions are met properly. We make friends with them, and they are our own shadow because they're out there, but they really represent us in here. He says, this brings greater joy, a kind of orgasm. So trying to protect yourself goes away. that nakedness begins to dawn. Because trying to protect oneself is all part of little mind, imaginary mind. You discover that you are naked, that you are your own expression, that you need no embellishment, no clothing, and no ornaments. When we come back into Rigpa, we are the expression of what we are, because we're not trying to be anything different. And you see yourself as you are very directly. This is known as Rigpa Vidya intelligence. Rik means perceiving, seeing, touching, and pa makes it a noun. Rigpa. It is self-existing conviction or understanding that never shies away from itself. Here it is. Can't shy away from itself. It's just filling the space. The fruition yana is another name, Drevu yana, Drevu Tekpa. And what it means is this, that, let's see how he puts it. The lower yanas fall into the problem of cause and result, and they are what are called the causal vehicles. It's like planting a flower. In order to be truly inspired to plant a flower, you have to have seen it. This open awareness is the flower. If you haven't seen it, if it hasn't been pointed out to you, if you haven't even seen it just dimly, then the idea of planting a seed is a very abstract idea. Somebody tells you, oh, you're going to get something beautiful out of it, but you don't know. It's sort of an experiment. He says, in order to be inspired to plant your flower seed, you first need to have seen a flower that has already blossomed. And when you've done that, then it's a tremendous inspiration. You plant the seed, you think, oh boy, look what I'm going to get. Recently, my brother sent me amaryllis bulbs. I never had them before. Wow, is that something? Amaryllis, holy moly, you get this bulb that's just a what is it, a round bulb, and suddenly out of it grows this extraordinary flower with you doing nothing. You don't even have to water them. It's amazing. So in order to be inspired to plant your flower seed, you first need to have seen a flower that has already blossomed, at least a picture, somebody telling you, about it, your teacher, a tradition, the books. It's going to become, and the more you understand, and the more you have an experience of that fruition, the more you are inspired to do the work to get it. So as we start with a glimpse, we start with a pointing out, and we begin to experience it in our intuitive selves. And that inspires us to practice more and more. And the more we practice, the more real that flower becomes, the more real Rigpa becomes, the more we settle into the freedom, the beauty, and the love and joy of this world, the compassion, the meaningfulness. It always has these three qualities. They call it was talked about earlier as body, speech, and mind. The body is the beauty, you might say, the presence of this world. The speech is the meaning that is communicated, and the mind is the freedom. The body is also the love. So in the Vajrayana, there is an enormous emphasis put on the result rather than the ground and the path. The result becomes the ground. You have had some experience, some understanding of Rigpa. That is the result. And that becomes the ground from which you work. And coming back to that again and again is the path. And you grow it. You make it more and more full and real. Another name is the Upayana, Upayayana. Upaya means skill and means. And in this Tantra, you see the complete psychological geography. You can see neurosis, you can see sanity, and everything that they both contain. So the lower yanas are inferior to Tantra because they fail to present the greater skillful means, he says. And it's the secret yana, Guya yana. Guya means secret in Sanskrit. Sanwe in Tibetan. Sanwe Tekpa, or the Guya yana. And it's self-secret again. It's self-secret because if you just read about it in books, you'll never get it. You have to have a living communication with somebody, with the tradition, passing it down. It has to be experienced, however faintly or strongly. Each one of us is different. He says, tantric teachings are sometimes deliberately kept secret from those who have not heard the message of the Vajrayana because of the danger of confusing people and disrupting their path. And sometimes people, they'll read about these practices of Vajrayogini and tantric sex and all of this, and they go off on these tangents of reciting mantras and wearing special clothing, and they think that all this is going to do something for them, and it becomes a huge byway. And it's a cruelty. So the tantric path is both self-secret and deliberately kept secret from those who aren't ready for it yet. And what it means to be not ready for it yet is that they haven't heard the message of this is it right here, right now. And then there's Dharana. Dharanas are mental concentrations on an object without wavering, and it holds and fastens things together. So when you begin to practice the Vajrayana more and more, you begin to relax into this state of awareness, and it becomes more and more, continuous. And what is held together is body, speech, and mind of the practitioner. Because when we come present, here and now, body, speech, and mind are one unity. They aren't separate. Here's the body, here's the speech, and the mind is the intelligence that sees it and understands it all. To Tantra, mind, speech, and body are synchronized right here, in this present moment. All we have to do is relax back into conscious awareness, into Rikpa. I'm using that word, that's the Nyingma word for it, as opposed to Tamagishepa, which is the Kagyu word. Because in this text, he talks about Rikpa. And it's the yana of luminosity, the Ursel Dorje Tekpa. Ursel is a very powerful word and an important word in the Vajrayana. Means luminosity or luminous, Sel means clear. And the idea is that when you begin to come present, none of this has any ongoingness. It's not like a past and a future. It's just arising and passing away in this present moment. And as it does, as it arises and passes continuously without substance, it communicates so vividly, luminously, the luminosity of this pink skin and gray hair, and of the silver glasses, and of these words. The phenomenal world glows with luminosity. And so this is called the yana, the vehicle of luminosity, that we are relaxing into this awareness and the world is glowing, luminous. The two go together. He says, altogether, Ursel means a clear sense of existence, perpetually existing without beginning or end. This is it, without beginning or end. This never ends. A natural form of perpetualness, which you can experience through the practice of shamatha or vipassana or tonglen, or for that matter, whatever practice you are doing, it is natural and very basic self-existence, luminosity, continuity, freedom, meaning. All of these things are here embodied in this present moment. And finally, it's the imperial yana, the ultimate yana. It is associated with that post-meditation practice. You see, this practice of Rikpa, you can do it on the cushion, fine. You can do it as you walk down the street, great. This post-meditation practice is important. And it is actually works much more with most meditation experiences of all kinds, he says. Altogether, the Vajrayana brings concentrated possibilities of wisdom. This is what Rigpa is. It's the ultimate knowledge. It sees and understands this world. Such wisdom is not dependent on any other factors. It is naked wisdom itself. This wisdom is very general, at the same time very precise. Thoughts are always so limited. They say, well, that is black. Well, there's so much more to it than that you experience in seeing the whole thing with Rigpa. But a word, thoughts are very small, and they have very small purposes. So we'll stop there. This is the introduction to the fruitional yana, where we take the fruition as the path. Coming back to the goal becomes our path again and again, coming back to Rigpa. So we can have a discussion if you like. Vicky.
Is Rigpa the same as Alia?
All of these words point to reality. And it's like, that I keep saying, it's like the blind man and the elephant. And one feels the leg and says, oh, it's like a tree. And the other feels the ear and says, no, it's like a giant leaf. And the other feels the side of the elephant and says it's like a house. All these words are pointing to different aspects of reality. Alaya refers to the open space in which everything is arising and passing away. Rigpa refers to the intelligence that illuminates that space, that is one with it. Which we have, and it's our intelligence. We've all got it. It's our fundamental nature. We can't get away from it. And the space too. We're living in it. We just get lost in worries, thoughts, dreams. Thank you. Great question.
Lane has a question.
Hi,
Lane.
John.
Hi, Lane.
Yeah, and actually, just a comment. All this talk about Rigpa and skillful means has me realizing how much Vajrayana depends upon activity.
On what?
In that, on activity. I mean, sitting meditation, doing visualizations. It doesn't really evoke Rigpa, and it doesn't provide an opportunity for skillful means. It's like what I'm seeing is that activity is required to be able to see clearly what's happening in the moment and to know how to respond. Does that make sense? Or do you, maybe you don't agree? But anyway, that's kind of what I'm processing at the moment.
There are a variety of paths within the Vajrayana. By paths, I mean techniques, methods. And some of them involve a lot of activity, and some of them involve nothing. Just complete rest in awareness. And everything in between. So it just depends on sort of where you gravitate, which particular version of the Vajrayana you wind up practicing. Some of them are very energetic and involve a lot of activity. And some of them The path of Rigpa in its purest form is called the lazy person's path to enlightenment.
But wouldn't you say skillful means requires activity?
Skillful means is activity, yes, but it might have zero effort. If you're totally present, it can be utterly effortless, your skillful means, or whatever you might be doing.
Sure.
Don't you think? If there's no ego involved?
Yeah, I mean, that knowing, it's just right there. You know, there's no, you just do it. There's no thinking.
Yeah, and within that effortless knowing, you can do all kinds of things. All kinds of things. Look at the 84 siddhas. Weren't we talking about them the other day? Michael was. All the different things they did. You know, Talopa pounded sesame seeds and, you know, ate the rotten fish that fishermen threw away. And he was also a pimp. He had a lot going on. But each one of them did something different.
I think Meg had a question, and also Frederick has a hand raised.
Great.
Thanks, Barry. So I'm a little confused. Sometimes I hear you say, or I read that the path is, the goal of the path, the goal is enlightenment. And then sometimes I heard you say just a little bit ago that the goal is the path. And they're very different for me. At least for me, if the goal is enlightenment, then it sets up a problem for me from the start, sort of the carrot and stick type of thing. And I wonder if I have that wrong, or if so.
No. Michael, do you want to take it? I've been answering all these questions.
I'll start, and then you can add. I think it just even going back to what was in the chapter tonight, I think that we often have some feeling maybe that things could be different, or that how we're working with things is, that there's some kind of issue or concern. And we begin to, and if we practice meditation, we begin to have flashes of experience that perhaps things could be different. It becomes a problem when we have some sense, some sort of conceptual goal that we're trying to reach. And I think that's maybe what you mean when you say that the notion of enlightenment becomes a problem, because we're always going to be able to understand that relative to some state that we think is better than where we are. What we're talking about now is actually letting go of those kinds of concepts and actually coming to realize what we already are. And that sometimes begins with even just that sense that things could be different, or should be different. And it's not so much that, what that is that we think we should become. That can be a problem. But the intelligence that says that there's something limited, there's something off, that in itself is really where, that's really where it is. And it's coming to increasingly recognize that experience of wakefulness, awareness, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, that sense of, possibility that we experience. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. If the goal is to awaken, it just takes me out of the moment that I'm in, because I'm not enlightened. But that doesn't mean that there's not something in this moment for me. So enlightenment actually becomes a distraction for me.
Exactly.
Because it's a concept.
Yeah, okay. That's terrific. I mean, there are these two approaches, what they call the causal and the fruitional. And in the causal approach, we're told about some goal, and we have these vague ideas about what it might be, or not so vague, but combinations. And then we set off on a path, we think, to achieve this goal that we've heard about, that we haven't seen. that's been described. This is the approach of the lower yanas, it said. The approach of the upper yana, the higher yana, like the Vajrayana, is that we begin to actually experience the goal, this open, clear awareness in the present moment. It might be vague, it might be just, a fraction of it, but we begin to see the logic and the importance of it. How it's a giving up of ego and suffering. And while we can't do it perfectly yet, we've seen a glimmering of it. And we begin to take that as the path. Rather than a bunch of practices that are aimed at some imaginary goal, we begin to take this coming back to awareness as our path. And it becomes more and more meaningful the more we are able to rest in this awareness. And it makes more and more sense. So this is taking the fruition as the path. At the beginning, we've only had a little glimpse of it, but we're still taking that little glimpse. However big it may be, and each one of us is different. There's no way to measure that.
Great,
Does that
thank
make
you.
sense?
Thank you, yeah.
That's a great question. Thank you. Important one. Judith.
That was a great answer. Thank you so much. That clears away a lot of cobwebs. Thank you.
It's right out of the tradition.
Yes.
Yeah, we're so fortunate to have met this path. It's really amazing.
Yeah. For sure.
Fred and Ed are still waiting.
Oh, Fred, okay. And then Ed.
Hi, John.
Hi, Fred.
So I got a question about, I have like a glimpse of just openness or like very vibrant scene, and like maybe for a few seconds, there won't even be a comment or a thought. They're just open. And then, I come back then like, all right, start commenting on it, get lost something or some other distraction comes up. What's that resistance that, because I remember we learned about this before, or we talked about this, the resistance to not remaining in that state of awareness constantly.
It's habit. That's what they say in the teachings. The arising and passing away of thought repetitively is a habit. And what we are doing is we are beginning to break that habit by coming back to awareness. And you have to do it over and over again. There's a book by Thich Nhat Hanh that addresses this very point. It's called Understanding Our Mind. And he talks about how these habits of thought arise over and over again in varying degrees of intensity. And the way in which we wear them out and shift our loyalty, you might say, to awareness is by bringing them to awareness. That when you realize that you're thinking, you don't try and stamp it down or anything, you just see it. And as you see it, you are awake, aware. And you burn out that habit slowly, over and over again. You wear it away. And he says that you wear it away. This is Buddhists are so addicted to numerological schemes that you wear it away in 81 degrees, these habits of thought. And the first degree is strong, strong, strong. The second degree is strong, strong, medium. And the third degree is strong, strong, weak. And the fourth degree is strong, medium, strong. Get it? It's so Buddhist. Buddhists do this because there was no writing back in those days, and also it's very. I think it's very helpful that it tells you that you're not going to maybe everybody's different. Some people might just get it like that. They call them instant realizers, and an instant realizer is able to go through the whole path very fast. Why? Because in previous lives, they've accumulated the karma that has prepared them in this life to just hear the teachings and get it right away. But most of us are not instant realizers. We're gradual progressors. And we're going to get it by work and progression and repetition over and over again. That's the majority of us. And so what we do is we realize that we're thinking, you just see it, and automatically you're back in awareness. We are shifting, Trungpa Rinpoche called it shifting your loyalty from thought, anxious thought about me, to this Rigpa, this awareness in the present moment.
Very helpful and encouraging.
I'd say, yeah, that's great if you could be encouraged.
Thank you.
And it's difficult to do. I mean, even that feeling of, first of all, judging the thought as something bad and then wanting to stamp it down or get rid of it is all generating more thought. That's why it's so important to practice and develop just some of the stability of shamatha and then the clear seeing of vipassana. Because otherwise we are so habituated to following our thoughts, getting into whether, good, bad, whether we want more or less, that we're constantly, pulled away.
Self-improvement, the worst vice people have.
Ed? I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Particularly Meg for asking your question. The tension between development and continuity. We're human beings. There's really nothing wrong with being a human being, and we grow, we develop. We say that obscurations hinder our insight, but the obscurations, come with the turf. So, so I don't even know if there's a question here. It's just this tension between the continuity that you're speaking about in Tantra and the thought of development, of how we change and come to understand or maybe come to see as part and parcel of the way we operate.
Michael?
I'm not sure I understand what your question is exactly.
I don't either. I don't know that it's a question. It's just this. There's an evident tension. Maybe because I'm too hung up on the concepts, but I don't know how to get out of these concepts. Between, as human beings, we develop and we grow, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the way we do everything. We don't start out with instant enlightenment. We have to work through these things. Yet, on the other hand, the whole point of this is that everything that we need is already there. Mm-hmm. Tantra is about continuity. Mm-hmm. And are the samsaric obscurations, how do they fit in with the concept of continuity?
I think that's, for me, the most helpful. What's helped me to understand what I think you're asking is to come to understand that it's a question of recognition, and that sometimes we're able to recognize awareness, and sometimes we're too distracted or caught up and we don't. Sokni Rinpoche has an interesting expression. He says, caught up in the display, lost in the display, we forget the essence. And that's, that when we don't recognize, that's what happens. We get so caught up in the display of the senses, the display of thoughts and feelings, that we don't recognize our nature, or have a very dim recognition of nature. But then other times we're able to settle and just see, and it can be very energizing and clear. And that what seems to happen through practice is our ability to recognize and come back to recognition becomes stronger and stronger, just because we become more familiar and begin to see possibilities. And even experiences that on the surface seem to be negative or confused, we come to understand possibilities within within those experiences. But we don't have to just push things away, but we can actually, and that's the whole point, for instance, of when we talked about the Buddha families, the different ways in which energy can express itself, either in neurotic form, but even in anger, there can be tremendous clarity. That in passion, there can be tremendous appreciation. And, when we're able to recognize those possibilities and not get caught up in the ego aspects of aggression or, desire and grasping, then that energy is available to us. And that increasingly it really, I've more and more understood it as coming back to a question of recognition. And that's why both study and practice are important, because it helps to highlight, or helps us begin to understand these things, see these things more easily.
Could you tease out a little bit the concept of continuity, tantric continuity, and how that relates to what you've just said, please?
I'd say that the continuity is there. It's just a question of, do we recognize it or not? We don't need to create it.
Thank you very much.
Henry, I think this will be the last. More time.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. So what strikes me again and again is the mention of warmth. And every time I read the word in the text, it brings warmth into the text. And so what I notice is it seems that warmth it's necessary, basically, for any kind of dynamism along the path. For, I don't know, I mean, what you just were saying with like Rigpa, that maybe warmth is not necessary there, but it seems like warmth is necessary. It's like the glue or the attraction force for anything to continue. And I don't know if that's accurate, or if you could speak to that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're going to get to this, but the three bodies of the Buddha, which are actually just a description of reality, this world, and these three main qualities. One is nothing has any true solid existence. Everything is a constant presentation, arising and passing away, like these words, like this gesture, in the present moment. The second quality is that as things arise and pass away, they communicate what they are and more. There's tremendous communication and meaning, not just in words, but in everything, in the way phenomena present. That's the art, you might say, of the phenomenal world. And the third quality is that as everything arises in freedom and communicates what it is, it does it with huge warmth, compassion. It's called love, joy. That all of this is worth falling in love with. And these are the three main qualities of reality as they're described in the Vajrayana. Freedom, meaning, and compassion. And it goes on, and you could read whole books on this. I love the one about compassion. It's called Ninja, and that means noble heart in Sanskrit. No, it's Tibetan. Karuna in Sanskrit. And it pervades everything. It pervades the phenomenal world, this compassion.
Thank you.
It's the
Very
orange
beautiful.
of your shirt, you know? It's the sound of these words. It's the compassion. Yeah, it is beautiful. Sorry.
Thank you.
Well, we should end. Dan, you want to put up the closing chants? And we'll have a discussion tomorrow. Or I can do it, I think. Get my cursor to work. So we'll do the prayer for peace and then dedicate the merit generated by this practice to the benefit of all sentient beings. I'm going to mute all. Here we go. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound glory. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Michael.
John.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Mike.
everybody.
Michael.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow night, maybe.
See you tomorrow night.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.